ain't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie, the Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, so today's video, we're going to be talking about Absolute Superman number 3. And this one is the one that's going to teach us a little bit more about who this version, the absolute version of Kal-El, really is. And something that we learned really early on about this version of Superman is that, you know, we think about this character on Earth Prime, we think about the fact that, you know, he's supposed to be this exceptional being on Earth, and technically, in the Absolute Universe, he still kind of is. I mean, we really haven't seen any other characters as powerful as the Absolute Superman. Maybe save for the Absolute Wonder Woman, who even in this universe we've learned has her own set of limitations. But because of the nature of how Kal-El came to Earth on Earth Prime, he does not have the same history with Krypton that you would expect, especially compared to this version of Kal-El. Kal-El in this universe actually got to live out most of his time on Krypton. He is very much a young boy at the time of Krypton's destruction, seemingly, and in this universe, he's just average. Compared to other Kryptonians, at least in terms of like his grades and his schooling, he's not considered a good student, but not because he's not as intelligent as, you know, anyone else would be. No, it's just that he's trying to do things what I guess you could technically call the good old-fashioned way. He's not trying to use the artificial intelligence of Krypton to write his papers for him, something that we talked about with the previous issue. And he's also not particularly interested in doing things the way that traditional Kryptonians would normally do. But what I like about this is that Kal-El's parents have an opportunity, and one that I think is really heartwarming to see, because it goes in a way that I feel would be really easy to write a different direction. And I'm glad that Jason Aaron didn't go this route. It's that when his parents are pressed with the situation that they need to talk to Kal-El's teacher about his bad grades and how terrible he's doing in class and how he's not using the artificial intelligence to write his papers for him, we discover that they don't take what's going on with Kal-El terribly seriously, to the point that when Kal-El says he actually does want to continue writing papers himself, that he does not want to follow what is effectively Kryptonian tradition, thousands of years of Kryptonian tradition, mind you, his parents are perfectly okay with it because they want him to blaze his own trail. They want him to stand up for what he believes in. And that is at its very core the essence of Superman. You still reach that Earth Prime essence of Superman without even needing Martha and Jonathan Kent. You can just get all that right here directly from his parents, which I think is such a really cool thing and actually separates the absolute Superman from the Earth Prime version of Superman, who didn't have that luxury, though he still came about his values the same way, by way of different parents. But in this case, yeah, I think that's actually pretty cool that we get to see, and not even just in this instance, but this is the fact that Earth Prime Superman, he never got to know his family outside of the artificial intelligence he was sit down with when he landed on Earth. But in this particular case, he's actually seen his birth parents and supposedly going to be traveling with them to Earth. Like, at least in this particular case, they're not plotting to send him off into the cosmos by himself, unaccompanied by any kind of a parental unit. This is one of those moments that kind of pokes fun at the differences between the Absolute Universe and the main continuity. It really warmed my heart to see this sort of thing, and especially as a parent, I feel like that's something every parent should want for their child. They should want to see their child through everything, and they should also want to see their child blaze their own trail, to go out and do their own thing, and want to encourage them to do so. So I actually thought this was something really cool. Like, it legit brought a tear to my eye reading this. It's just that cool to see. As a child growing up, this is the type of stuff you want to hear from your parents, and something that, like, if you are a parent yourself, you want to be able to have the opportunity to say to your own child. It's just, I don't know, makes being a parent so awesome. It's hard, it's difficult, it's not easy, but it's definitely part of the reward of being a parent. So yeah, I think, Jason Aaron really killed it with this. I mean, he knocked it out of the park. But what really turns this issue on its head is how the hierarchy of Krypton handles the impending doom of the planet itself. You see, the whole time we've been kind of going through the motions on this, it seemed as though no one was paying attention to what was wrong with Krypton. That it was a, oh no, we don't believe in climate change type of shenanigans. No, oddly enough, the hierarchy of Krypton is painfully aware of everything that Jor-El and Lar-El have been trying to tell them. The planet is dying, and that it's gonna die sooner rather than later. I've said this a couple of times now, just with the past couple of issues with Absolute Superman, that when you want to think about what each of these three core Absolute DC titles represent, I feel like Absolute Superman is way more social economic commentary than either of the other two titles. There's a little bit of it in Absolute Batman. I would even say a fair chunk of it, but I feel like Absolute Superman is really, really dialed in on the pulse of like current events and showcasing a narrative in such a way that is very representative of what's going on outside our window right now. And I think it's kind of wild that the hierarchy of Krypton, having all of this chest beating about following tradition, not bucking the thousands of years that Krypton has built up its society, they don't care about that sort of thing, because all they really care about are the elites protected. It's a very interesting scenario when we discover that the elites, they actually took the advice of Lar-El from back when she was a kid. They did actually start building ships so that they could travel amongst the stars, the very thing that they had her excommunicated from the Science Guild for, the upper echelon of Kryptonian society, and bust her down to the bottom rung of the ladder as a child to the Labor Guild. We also saw that when Jor-El criticized some of the ways that Krypton was handling things and being too strung up in tradition and trying to uphold all that, well, guess what? The very same thing they kicked him out of the Science Guild for and down to the same Labor Guild, they did. They bucked tradition to save their own asses. Don't pay attention to the animals dying out in the fields and all the green gases popping up out of the ground and how people are just randomly dying from illnesses and toxicity that shouldn't exist. Ignore all that. Don't look up. The sky isn't on fire. The fish aren't dying in the water. The rabbits aren't dying from strange burns and mass, and gas leaks aren't popping off everywhere. Don't believe your lying eyes. And that's basically what this whole thing is. They knew, and they built ships to escape Krypton and not tell anyone. So this actually sets up a very different universe. Whereas under normal circumstances, Clark is one of the only Kryptonians in the DC Comics universe. Yeah, there's other ones out there, that show up later. We know Supergirl shows up later, and then later on, we get Jonathan Kent, who is Clark's son, and we also get all the other super people, like various different versions of Superboy and so on and so forth. Yeah, we get all that stuff. There's always like other Kryptonians hanging around out there in some way, shape, form, or fashion, especially characters like General Zod. However, unlike that universe, it seems like the elites, I don't know if we'll see them somewhere down the stretch, but it seems like we probably will. They got away. They've run off in their ships, fled Krypton before it destroyed, and didn't take any of the poor or working class with them. So yeah, there's a very high chance that Clark will see some other Kryptonians in the Absolute universe, and they'll very likely be bad guys, no differently than General Zod was. So it's going to be interesting to see how that is worked out from a narrative perspective. Or I know technically, while the first arcs of all these Absolute books are only 5 issues, all of these books are technically ongoings. They keep getting record extra printings, like it's going out of style, especially Absolute Batman. And yeah, these books aren't going anywhere, at least I don't think so. We'll probably end up seeing that's going to be like a story arc that's going to pay dividends down the road. I don't think you're going to get it in the first 5 issues of this. Or maybe you will. You never know. Well, we still haven't figured out the identity of Brainiac, but Getting back to Brainiac, I mentioned earlier that Kal-El did not leave Krypton alone. He did actually set off with his parents in tow with him. But there is something else that happens, towards the end of this issue that makes me wonder about the status of the Kents in this universe. We saw in the first issue that the Kent home seemed to have been bought off by Lazarus Corps. And we also see in this issue, while we don't get much mention of a Kent anything in issue 2, this issue we discover that Martha Kent is in an assisted living situation. She seems to be undergoing some level of dementia, or at least that's what the doctors seem to believe is going on with her. And she keeps calling out for a son that the nurses and orderlies don't believe exist, that because she doesn't have a son on record. But we do see that there is a picture frame by her where we see what is very likely herself and Jonathan Kent, but also with someone standing in between them who looks like it could potentially be a son. We don't know who that is. And while it would be easy to think that it's Kal-El, I don't think it's Kal-El. I would be shocked if that were actually Brainiac, because we saw that, once again, the house was bought by Lazarus Corps. Who would have any interest in buying that house if not someone who was connected to it? If it did turn out to be Kal-El, that would be a bit of a shocker, because it was made a pretty open thing that this is a Kal-El who has no history with the Kents. So that would basically make that statement a lie. But it wouldn't be the first time that, we have been lied to by somebody in regards to what is or is not going to be in a comic book story or any other piece of media for that matter. But yeah, I don't think that's Kal-El. I think we're actually getting more hints and teases at where Brainiac comes from. He's very likely possibly a Kryptonian who just threw himself all the way in to AI, just the same as a lot of the other people on Krypton normally would. It would actually explain why Lazarus Corps is so heavily invested in it. We'll just have to wait and see what the answer is.